Good afternoon, my name's Chris Robert Shaw, sitting in Paul Moulton's chair. On this occasion, Paul's asked me to do so. The reason for that is that I've had significant dealings with Sandra Preston, the boss of Abbotswood, for a significant period of time, and on that basis it is helpful in the discussion that we're about to engage in. It isn't a repetition of Sandra's original presentation. It is just to look at that and examine elements of it, go into more detail on certain aspects, and there are other matters as well that Sandra now wants to raise in addition to that which she's already discussed. So Sandra, good afternoon, thank you very much. The first point I'd like to raise with you is one that didn't appear in your first interview, and that was the matter of registrations and inspections organisation. And they do regular inspections, both declared and unannounced, and I think you had a significant unannounced inspection, a routine one, just before the COVID crisis broke. Could you tell me about that?
Yeah, we had an unannounced inspection on a Sunday at the end of January 2020, where 3 inspectors turned up unannounced to go through everything. And they spent 2 days there.
How did that report work out?
It was, yeah, there was a few very minor things, but there was nothing major at all. And
normally speaking, you can see those reports online. Anybody in the public can do that, can't they?
You can. You can go onto the Isle of Man government website and actually look just under registration and inspections for care of the adult care homes it's under, and you can go and see majority of people's reports. However, Abbotswoods were on there, but I don't know if they've removed them because we are no longer, Abbotswood is no longer an actual firm, because it's now under totally different management, or whether they've just removed them because before, about 6 months ago when I looked, they had a, it said Abbotswood / Silverdale, so people could still read the reports back from prior from COVID.
And the report you got on that January was satisfactory or good?
I would say it was good.
Good, fine. Yeah. It didn't, did it, mention matters which you raised, I think, in your last interview about later on when they were, as it were, almost, and I would use this term, almost witch hunting to find things wrong. Did they not mention the fact that there was an issue with the fire certificate and wiring? And if that was truly the case, wouldn't that have come up in an inspection in January?
It would have done, and we had our, you have to have a 5-year hard wiring check, which it was all up to date. Exactly the same as the fire certificate. We had the fire people down in the, I think it was the November of 2019, to basically, we were starting to do our refurbishment, and we wanted to know if the doors and the surrounds were going to be up to fire standards.
So the refurbishment programme was all planned anyway?
It was, yes.
Yeah. So moving on then to one of your other comments about the treatment that Catherine Magson offered you when she spoke to you. She criticised you highly for not, because of your health condition, not actually being on site. Were you aware at that time that Catherine Magson herself wasn't even on the island?
No, I wasn't.
Were you aware?
I was only aware of that a lot later on.
Yeah. Were you aware that Catherine Magson has no medical qualifications at all?
No, I wasn't at the time, but I am now. Okay.
The next, one of the other points that you raised in your original interview was you mentioned the arrival of the GPs. You and I have spoken a number of times in the past.
Yeah.
The viewer should know that. On those occasions, you've always been very complimentary about the GPs. Would you like to take this opportunity to say something about them now?
I would. The Ballasalla practice was always, all my residents were under the Ballasalla practice, and they were exemplary in their care. we also had two non-medical prescribers. One was me and one was the other chief nurse. So we would do a lot of the day-to-day, prescribing if we needed to. And the GPs would always come if we called them. They were always there for the residents. They spent a long time with them. They did a regular, what I call either Friday or Monday. They came up every Friday and Monday until obviously COVID, and then they stopped. They were obviously advised, probably by government, not to, as all GPs seem to be, not to go in and see people unless they needed to.
Yeah. And these were the GPs with a geriatrician as well, who examined all the residents and gave a clean bill of health, with the exception of one lady who had a bed sore. But you spoke about that in your last interview. So
the three GPs were called in on the Monday. They were pulled out of their bank holiday Monday, and they were told to come and meet at the home. And then there was a geriatrician present and another independent GP.
Also, I'd like to give you this opportunity to speak about your staff, because I know that there was some tremendous work done. Would you like to take this opportunity to mention the work some of your staff put in at this very difficult time?
My staff were absolutely amazing. I can't put it into words how brilliant they were. They tried so desperately hard to keep the home going. They were so loyal. They were just, I can't put it into words how loyal and supportive and everything that they were, how they conducted themselves. A lot of my staff in the beginning, when COVID hit the Isle of Man, because of the media press, when I say a lot of them, I would say a small percentage of them, decided that they weren't going to come back to work because they were scared. But that was from the media hype in the UK at the time. They were frightened for their families, they were frightened for their children, they didn't want to die themselves. At that time, there was no vaccines, no nothing. So they didn't. Some of my staff decided that was it, that they weren't coming back to work until it was over. But the ones that stayed and the ones that supported everybody were just unbelievable.
I remember at the time that I was watching the difficulties care homes in the UK were under during the COVID crisis, and I remember being in awe of a particular home where some of the staff actually moved in. Yeah.
That was the same with us. Initially we had a lockdown to try and keep COVID out, where we had Team A and Team B, and Team A did 2 weeks on, and then Team B were going to do another 2 weeks. But that was scuppered through the media, or social media should I say, by somebody that was saying some dreadful things at the time, which I then went into my staff and showed them, and they said, well, we can't continue this then if this is what's going to go out on social media. So they made the decision, not me, to put a stop to that. And then, but they stayed in for a whole, I think it was 10 days in the end, which was amazing, to sleep there and everything.
So they actually put a stop on their lives to try to protect the residents. Yeah. Extraordinary.
And then after the licence was revoked, 2 of my staff stayed at the home because they wanted to protect their residents.
So if we can move on to another matter which you raised in your interview, and that was the charges, the criminal charges that were identified or considered, and they were, just to repeat, they were manslaughter, gross negligence, neglect, ill treatment, and also non-specific health and safety matters. Now, I raise this because I, along with, I'm sure, the vast majority of the population, if not all, believed that those charges related to the overall situation in Abbotswood and the way Abbotswood was conducting itself. I'm now clear that that wasn't the case, that actually these matters related to one specific issue, one specific incident, if you like, which ultimately were watered right the way down to very straightforward health and safety matters. Have I understood that now correctly, that these charges were effectively not to do with the COVID crisis? I think it's important to say that, if that is the case.
It is the case.
Right.
As we got into the questioning, and the investigation started in apparently June of 2020, and we were not arrested, or I was not arrested, until the October. So somebody had gone round doing interviews with my staff, and they put a whole thing together, and I was gobsmacked when I actually was arrested, because I was like, what are you talking about? And one of the things in particular was from a time back in early March, so it had nothing to do with COVID. The other one was because at the time COVID broke out in my home, I didn't move one resident, and that was explained quite easily and was all dropped. So it wasn't anything to do with the care of the residents as a whole.
I raise it. Yeah, because I believe it's in time. It's going to be a really important point, because as a member of the House of Keys, of course, we were subject to what I would now class, with hindsight, as a ridiculous sub judice block put on Tynwald for nigh on 3 years. Sort of parallel the gagging orders that you were subject to, but the important point for the viewers to understand here is that they were not related to COVID. So Tynwald was effectively, I would suggest, was under a gross misapprehension about what this whole matter was about. So you're clear in your mind that it was not related to the COVID issue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of the health and safety might have been, but because we were not told about any of the health and safety, or I wasn't, until the following year, and then it ended up being nothing.
Now, you touched in your interview, just en passant, you touched on the issue of how COVID got into Abbotswood, and you referred to Rachel Glover and her work. I have double-checked the matter with Dr. Rachel Glover, and she is satisfied that, had the circumstances been possible, she would have been able to trace back, in other words, go in reverse to find out how it got in. That she'd said to the lab, the senior in the lab, the DHSC hospital lab, that all the samples taken from Abbotswood should be retained. Subsequently, it transpired that they were not. So that opportunity that you raised as an option has gone. So I just wanted to raise that with you. I think a very important point which needs to be discussed, and this will be difficult for everybody concerned, yourself, the staff, relations of those who died, but this issue about once the licence was taken away, what actually happened in the home with regard to the treatment. And I think it's important to raise the issue about it wasn't actually authorised Liverpool care pathway that was adopted once you were removed, but that you had concerns about the tender loving care issue. Could you explain to me how it went wrong on the evidence that you've got and what you know?
The evidence I've got is that my managers were still in there at the time, and they were reporting back to me. and so were some of my staff about major concerns. I've still got the texts, I've still got the, I took pictures of it all, so that I had it, and my cook at the time was saying trays were coming back with nothing on there, nothing had been touched. So food was actually given,
right,
but it was not administered,
right.
and it was just put on a tray, and somebody that was bedbound or that needed feeding was, you know, not fed. I have evidence of some of my staff saying that they were pulled off giving fluids from people, and that they were sent to turn or to change somebody's pad or to do other jobs that weren't essential, that paracetamol wasn't given regularly to reduce temperatures, that temperatures weren't taken. So in my view, should I say, from all that evidence, although it wasn't the Liverpool care pathway as per se, they basically withheld vital fluids from them.
So,
because they didn't know them.
Okay, so how this came about, Catherine Magson, and we now know she wasn't on Ireland, we now know that she had no medical qualifications. She was the source of the decision to withdraw the licence. Now, do you think she understood what she'd actually done in withdrawing that licence? With hindsight, are you of the opinion that she didn't appreciate that it wasn't just the licence being withdrawn, but that would have the effect of removing the directors, the management and the staff of Abbotswood from that location? Do you think she understood that?
I'm not sure. She had an agenda, that was very certain. By her, if anybody knew me in the past, they would know that I was not somebody that was easily intimidated. And I stood up to a lot of people over the years about various different issues, and would not be intimidated. But she intimidated me, big style. And I think that, I don't know if she knew the full impact, because initially they came to me and said that they would remove the licence for a 2-week period to give me, to being able to put the staff in to help me, and then that they would...
Sorry, I don't quite understand that. They would remove the licence to enable you? Could you explain that?
They would remove the licence to enable the DHSC to be able to put staff in to help us.
Right.
And that was told to me at 10 o'clock on, I think it was the Monday, it might have been the Sunday. And then 2 hours later, they came back and said, oh no, we've read the Act again, and that isn't possible.
Right.
So
but they still went ahead with the removal of the licence.
So they still went ahead with the removal
so
of the licence.
So by that time, I would put it to you that it's reasonable that they, having at last read the regulations, the law, that they must have understood what they were doing, and yet they'd said to you that they hadn't got the staff available when you'd reached out for help in the
previous
first instance.
Monday. Yeah.
So they were running into an abyss by their actions, I would suggest.
Yeah.
What other alternative could there be in that situation? And so was that the reason why there were difficulties through lack of experience and understanding in trying to care for the residents once they'd, as it were, taken over, because some of them perhaps hadn't got the experience that your staff had?
Yeah, I would say that. A lot of it, it was taking people 3 hours to do a drug round. Well, and then they weren't doing other things.
So it was during, so we can see the whole process, as it were, in 3 parts. You could see the period running up to when the licence was removed.
Yeah.
We can see the period once the licence was removed and the whole situation, as it were, fell into an abyss. And then you see the third part, which was the DHSC preparing the hospital to receive residents from Abbotswood and presumably elsewhere. And I think it's recognised, isn't it, that DHSC did a good job in getting Newlands in order, and a tremendous amount of effort and energy was put in to try to recover the situation there. And yet we lost so many people, 18 I think it was,
in total,
in that period, which I'm calling the abyss, as it were. I put it to you that if that is the case, do you not believe that had the licence not been withdrawn, that the situation could very well have been much improved upon what actually happened?
Yeah, I do. I think that some of those people, residents, would have died anyway,
Right.
because we were high-end nursing, but I think a lot more would have been saved.